My approach to improving Australia's cultural diversity and, quite frankly, activism in general has generally been conservative. But lately, I've been questioning this, so I want to put this to the panel. So I'm a founding member of Media Diversity Australia that looks to improve cultural representation in the media of people from multicultural backgrounds, for example. Now, we have proportionately less people from migrant backgrounds doing media commentary, and that means we're missing out on their perspectives, even though they're Aussies as well. And that also makes our public debates more insular because our media just continues to be dominated by predominantly Caucasian Australians. And while there's nothing wrong with that, it means that there's often a particular worldview that goes with that, and a somewhat narrow one. And that happens on both the left and the right wing. Now, that said, I cannot stand the idea of forcing change by numbers. So my view is that any special treatment programs or rules just make reasonable people resentful towards diversity and inclusion programs, and even people in that minority tend to cringe. Say activists, for example, who assemble outrage mobs on social media, who attack anyone who raises concerns with multiculturalism or cultural clash within a company. Targets and quotas is a controversial issue as well that sadly seems to be picking up more momentum. So I strongly believe the best way to achieve a more diverse cultural perspective in this country is a shared responsibility. So it's where both the mainly Anglo and European establishments and our cultural minorities need to make an effort if we are going to shift things. And if that takes a bit longer, then forcing things through, fine, because it's going to be more genuine and accepted change rather than the faster change that can breed resentment or, goodness forbid, even racism. But I recently had an experience in a particular Christian not-for-profit where I'm on an advisory board where board positions became available. They became vacant, and some committee said, oh, look, we need to find someone from Melbourne to ensure that people from down there are represented. So, like, straight away, I'm not sure what that's going to say from Stephen's point of view, whether I've just lost his support. But this entire committee of 8 people were Caucasian. Now, I suggested that much of this particular Christian faith's future lay with multicultural communities such as Filipinos, Lebanese, Indonesians, and I was just greeted with total silence. Not objections, just silence. And then someone just moved on to another topic as if I hadn't said anything. And I'd sent some polite emails around this same topic. Again, just complete silence greeted it. And I just found this incredibly frustrating, and I just wasn't sure, well, where do I go from here? So I want to ask my fellow panelists, what is the right balance of carrots and sticks when you are pushing for a cause? What can you do to stop me turning into one of those woke outrage activists who believes that threats, social media pylons, and blasting white people in the media is the answer to improving cultural diversity? Talk me out of turning to the dark side of activism. Okay, Catherine, talk me off the ledge.
Well, I'm already grossly overrepresented, I gather, although if one reads the papers now, about 80% of the population are transgendered, but last time I looked, we're about 0.05%, so as 25% of the panel, I'm massively overrepresented, and it's only a rort if you're not in it, mate. So, but look, look, your point's well made, and particularly you spoke on 2 matters that of moment to me. I happen to be a believer myself, and you are quite correct, and I think it's something that Chris Bowen and a couple of the smarter people in the Labor Party realised, is that the no votes through those very strong Labor heartland seats out through Western Sydney, especially amongst the Pakistani diaspora community, Maronite Christians from the Middle East, voted no during the plebiscite. They had a Labor predilection on many issues, but their faith issues mattered to them. And the strongest growing Christian communities, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, Ky, are probably in Africa. So to get those kind of perspectives more adequately heard, and you see it in Rugby Australia's dispute with Israel Folau, all those Caucasian, middle-class, woke, sort of managerial class couldn't understand the depth of belief amongst the Islander and New Zealand and Maori and Pacific Islander communities who play rugby. So it is a dilemma. I've been chastised by one of your colleagues at Media Diversity, I might add, and essentially accused of being a white supremacist one night. I play in an all-male Pakistani observant Muslim cricket team, and it would be amusing to them to think that I am a white supremacist, but one of your colleagues made that outrageous allegation, and I was in one of those pylons, purely for making some observations. At that point, I think, I can't even recall what the substantive issue was, but I've been on the bottom of more than enough pylons by woke activists because I won't drink their Kool-Aid. So all I can say to you is I think your point's well made, but I think we do have a pretty viable multicultural society. We've got SBS, which does have a very, SBS is a standalone publicly funded broadcaster which runs an enormous amount of multilingual programs. So we're pretty richly blessed, which is not to say that more has to be done. But I would say this, when people talk diversity, and I've been to plenty of these conferences because for a short period of time I was the poster girl, I was the tame tranny who'd come along and say nice things about diversity. But pretty soon they found out that I vote for the National Party, that I believe in God, and suddenly I wasn't queer enough anymore. So diversity has to include diversity of thought, and that is not confined by skin colour.
Catherine, you're absolutely right. It's quite interesting. We've actually, at Media Diversity Australia, partnered with the Judith Neilson Institute. We're launching a training program, and I can tell you we're going through the recruiting now, and everyone on the committee is absolutely committed to make sure that we have a diversity of perspectives, because often, you're absolutely right, people are happy to have minorities on if they have certain correct viewpoints. And of course, that just goes against the whole idea of having diverse perspectives if they all just pretty much just line up to what we already say, except they're being said by someone who's yellow or brown. But look,
precisely.
And so look, I'm not sure which a colleague you're referring to or what happened there. What I can say, though, is that certainly even within our Committee on Media Diversity Australia, and again, I'm not sure if you might be referring to a board member, but there is a healthy diversity of views there. We have some very spirited debates and discussions, I promise you. So I'm not sure what happened there, but I certainly am not a favour of throwing around labels like white supremacist or even white privilege, for that matter. I don't think
happy to name it. It was on this program, and Antoinette Lattouf put up a photograph of me, Corey Bernardi, and Campbell Newman, and said she needed a stiff drink after dealing with these middle-class white whatevers. And Tasneem Chopra, to whom I'd been unfailingly courteous, including doing an introduction to my Pakistani cricket team, piled onto me and insulted me in the most grotesque fashion. And I just think I have to suck that up, and I'm quite happy to do so, but I'm going to call it out tonight.
Right. Okay. Well, look, Stephen, I'm keen to know what your perspective on this, coming from the left of politics, for example. I mean, Labor, for example, has often been very forthright with things like quotas, for example, in the case of women. What's your take? How aggressive do you have to be to affect change?
Well, look, we've experimented with both quotas and targets, and often they intermingle. So my suggestion is in the Labor Party, particularly on female representation, 52% of the population, we needed to put rules in place that over time allowed for when a pre-selection was coming up, when there was a seat vacancy, you just said that if you don't give us a better balance, and we set some targets that you had to meet, well, then you would lose control of the process. And surprisingly, some very talented women were suddenly found where they otherwise might not have been discovered, because they clearly were shrinking violence before that. So I think the way to try and get it right is to set yourself a target, give yourself a time frame so that you can work your way forward. You'll always have an argument about whether it should be 1 day or 10 years, and the quota should be 25% or 75%, and you'll get all of those arguments. But if you commit to wanting to see at the end of a time frame an increased balance, and give yourself a reasonable time frame that you can make those changes, then you'll have a stronger outcome. The Labor Party today is stronger for having the near 50%, and in some cases, in some chambers, in some parliaments across the country, more than 50% female representation. So I think there are ways to do it, but despite having said that, I've stood there and watched members of the government or opposition talk about Labor's quota girls and be very aggressive and denigrate them when they're standing there in a chamber where the vast majority of them were white Anglo-Saxon males standing behind them. But time's catching up even on the Liberal Party and the National Party, Catherine. So I think there are ways forward that don't have to overturn the apple cart and do that. And just on the woke question, I'm a huge fan of Obama on this. You might find that surprising. But Obama recently had a real crack at the woke brigade. He told them in no uncertain terms that the defund the police was not the way to try and win this debate. And the woke brigade piled on Obama.
Yeah, no, they absolutely did, Stephen. You raised a great point. Prue, last word to you.
Yeah, we only
what do you think? Was this a better way to... What's a better way to go?
Well, I actually question the need for your media diversity group anymore, because I think you turn on any commercial station, you look at the public broadcasters, there's people from all walks of life, all cultures, all you know...
Yeah, but I mean outside MasterChef and border security.
No. You look at the news. You look everywhere. I think that really it's a lame argument now. I think that really it's very representative of this secular country that we live in. And I really think that maybe go and find another organisation to get yourself aligned with.